Welcome, welcome, everybody. Super excited. We are here for another Facebook Live. We're the very first time I've ever interviewed somebody in this capacity. So I am really, really excited to have her here. Andria, thank you so much for joining us. We are really excited for this. I've honestly been looking forward to this one. So Andria is a previous veteran of law enforcement for the past 20 years, or she had it for 20 years, both local and federal settings. She's spent a majority of her career in high-risk assignments. She's also spent several years working in a private sector protecting high-level assets and an executive protection specialist. She now brings all of those amazing experiences to the general public surrounding St. Louis areas and things like that based on her personal safety and security seminars that she is able to bring to our area to help protect and keep us safe. So we are so appreciative of that. Her seminars are very practical. They're also relevant and based on age groups and things of that nature, they're very age appropriate. So depending on if she's talking to a corporation or if she's talking to a general group of people, age appropriate as well as situation and scenario based. So she designs it to help everyday citizens just essentially better navigate, unfortunately, some particular like scary times and dangerous world that we might be presented with. So Andria, thank you so much. Obviously, that's kind of a brief overview of you, but like tell us a little bit about yourself and just your journey to get to this point.
Of course. Yes. Thank you for having me. My journey was, I had an amazing career on the police department. There's really no other way to put it. I got to do all the fun, exciting assignments. I worked undercover for 9 years. I went to the best undercover schools in the country. I did undercover work for the FBI. I was in special operations. I worked with the U.S. Marshal Service on high-risk assignments and arrests. I was a supervisor in special operations. I worked high-level conspiracy cases. I worked a 4-year motorcycle gang case, which had indictments across 7 states, a RICO case. So needless to say, I spent a lot of time working around bad guys, observing bad guys, talking to bad guys, listening to bad guys. So it's given me a nice background that I can now in turn bring to the everyday citizen. And aside from that, I've done a lot of executive protection work also with Fortune 500 companies. So traveling with high-level executives as part of a team to keep them safe as they're traveling around the country and abroad.
I mean, it's like I'm talking to a TV show character or something. That's incredible. Like, that's amazing. How very, very cool. And I love that you've now turned this experience and all of your, past ventures to something that can come local and home and just to kind of help keep us in general safe. So that is really cool. During your, were there like specific moments or experiences that made you realize the importance of educating civilians about general safety and security?
I would say no specific moments on the police department. I think just my whole experience as a whole, when you're working undercover, you need to learn to look like an everyday citizen, but you're thinking like a police officer. So it was really just kind of the blending of police officer mindset with looking like a civilian or, doing hand-to-hand interactions with bad guys. And then obviously, we all watch the news. So it was like seeing this gap and seeing these news stories of these active shooter situations in malls, restaurants, movie theaters, churches, and then just as a supervisor in special operations, I was also a sergeant up in North County, just seeing everyday victims of crime. It was like there was a gap between what everyday citizens are experiencing day in and day out and like the knowledge that a lot of us as police officers have, especially those of us that have worked undercover. There was a gap that I just thought I could totally fill this gap. I have information. I have the ability to give it to these people. So that's kind of how it started.
Yeah. So then how long have you actually had the security consulting company? Like how long have you been doing that?
So I left the police department in 2022, in March of 2022, and I started doing my seminars in November of 2022. But I've done them other variations of seminars for the last 10 years, but this specifically just over like the last 4 years.
Yeah. So I know that we've kind of talked a little bit before we even begin our call, but can you talk about like what types of individuals or groups or companies do you kind of like do you work with? Do you like specialize in? What does that look like for your consulting services?
So I work with all different types of organizations and companies, from very, very large corporations to small neighborhood groups. I've always been somebody that believes that everybody should have access to the information. So I've done small groups of 10 people at a clubhouse. I've done larger corporations like Bunge Corporation, Bi-State Metro Development, large real estate firms incorporate our organizations. So I have a special seminar that's geared just towards real estate, people that are like showing homes and showing properties on their own. So it's really, the information is very scalable depending on who I'm speaking to. I've done it for groups of college students that are getting ready to head off to school. It's information that translates to at all ages, as long as you're, when we're talking about smaller kids, like smaller kids, teens and tweens, I kind of scale it down to what they would understand and benefit from. So it's available to anybody.
Yeah. What are some of the most common like vulnerabilities are you seeing in businesses and organizations today?
Businesses and organizations, I think some of them don't have like standard operating procedures when it comes to like active shooter, active violence type situations. Some have really great standards, but it's never actually been put into practice. So the higher level individuals and higher up in security like know what we have on paper, but maybe it hasn't been translated down to just the actual workers. I have a really great example of that. Actually, just a few weeks ago, I had a friend of mine who was working in a law firm in Clayton, and she had sent me a text message, "A man with a gun just entered the building. What do we do?" And so that was like really eye-opening that, this person was in the building and she didn't know what to do. And she's texting me. And I basically told her, if you can't get out of there, you need to barricade, listen for gunshots, yada, and so on and so forth. And everything ended up being okay. But in the end, she told me that it was way worse than what they were really originally kind of led on. And it was very eye-opening for her, I think, and everybody there, that was like, they really didn't know what to do, and we've all seen the video of the man in Manhattan walking, into the building with the long gun. It's like, can you imagine putting yourself in that situation? And do your employees actually know how to respond if something like that were to happen? So it's just, sometimes they think they know how they're going to react, but the people haven't actually had a chance to practice it or just had a discussion about it. Like, something being on paper doesn't translate into actually action. And when we're talking about active shooter type situations, we need to know how we're going to react, how we're going to escape, evade, or fight.
Yeah. So what would be like your standard of, hey, this is how often you practice this? That, like in schools, they do fire drills and they do like, so what type of, from a business standpoint, what type of drills do you suggest or recommend?
I suggest at least once a year, some type of training as regarding active shooter, active killer type situation. So whether it's me coming in and giving a personal safety and security seminar where we're going to talk about escape, evade, and fight, to one of my avert, active violence, immediate response training seminars where we will actually hands-on practice barricading. We will practice applying tourniquets. We will practice stop the bleed. There's a lot of different levels, and every business is different as to what they might actually need or require. But it needs to be more than just a piece of paper that everybody signs, to check a box. We need real world discussions because people have questions. And practice is always better, in my opinion, but I understand that not every business is going to be ready for that level, because when we're talking about those types of situations, it is intense. And so it's kind of like a step by step. So, bare minimum, having a seminar, having somebody come in, talk to you about, okay, this is what's going to happen to you physiologically when you hear shots fired down the hallway. There's just so many things that go into these types of bad worst case scenarios that general public just doesn't know about. So just even being aware, knowing how your body's going to physically respond in a high stress situation will help you minimize that, will help them think more clearly and logically and better able to respond to the situation, wherever it is, whether it's at work, in the mall, in your place of worship.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like I know this answer, but just in case there is something, do you notice any particular like industry or type of business that is maybe more at risk than others?
No, not necessarily. I mean, in my opinion, we're at risk every day. I mean, our world is inherently violent. I mean, we just saw that there was a mass shooting at a Chick-fil-A in New Jersey 2 nights ago. I mean, every time I do one of these seminars, literally within the week, there's some type of incident, whether it's at a Walmart, a church, a mall, casino, gas station parking lot. I mean, we
Yeah.
have an inherently violent world where firearms and other things, I mean, people are using vehicles. We saw that in New Orleans on New Year's Eve. It doesn't, if they don't have a gun, there's something else that they could use. So that's why I
Mhm.
teach these classes. I talk about awareness. I don't think there's any one place that's any more inherently dangerous. We all just need to recognize that the potential is everywhere, which is why we all need to be more aware of our surroundings.
Yeah. I know we were talking prior to this, and one of the things that I had asked her was, do you do any kind of like self-defense class or anything of that nature? And I loved your response. So would you mind, like, in that realm, how do you try to help individuals avoid a self-defense type of situation?
Yeah, so yeah, I don't teach self-defense because my seminars and my train of thought is that if we are really aware of our surroundings and we are what if situations and we have what if being situations and have a survival type mindset, we don't want to get to the point where we need self-defense, right? We want to have the ability to be so aware of our surroundings that when we see the guy on the gas station parking lot looking at us in a certain way where it makes him think he can come up to us and start asking for money or whatever it is, we see that and we address it before he gets close enough, right? So we say, hey, I don't have any money. Don't come over here. I can't help you. We don't want to get into a situation where we're that close to somebody where we're going to have to use self defense. We want to be so aware of our surroundings that we're not caught off guard. So, which is why I don't teach it. And in all reality, most of the situations that we're talking about these days are going to involve a firearm. And so, unless you are extremely proficient at hand to hand combat, that's not really going to help you in the situations that we're talking about.
Yeah. So kind of like what you were just talking about, like somebody approaches you at a gas station. I bet there are multiple people who that has occurred to, myself included, right? So what are some like practical safety strategies that families like, hey, I'm just out with my kids. Obviously, like being aware of your surroundings, but just to kind of protect yourself at home or just out and about, what would you suggest? Traveling, that kind of thing?
So, number one is yes, being aware of your surroundings, getting your head up and not in your phone, whether you're sitting in a car, whether in a parking lot, walking into a store, walking into the gym. I can't tell you how many times on just a regular day, myself walking into the gym or a store, I can just walk through the parking lot and see how many people are sitting in their car with their heads down. That's number one. Get your head up. Number two, uh, be aware of your surroundings when you're pumping gas at a gas station, when you're walking into the grocery store. Pay attention. Which cars are occupied? Who's on foot near you? And are they paying attention to you? If you're sitting there pumping gas and you see somebody, that's clearly paying attention to you and they're thinking about coming over there, think about what are you doing to make them think that you're the one that they should approach. That's what we
Mhm.
need to think about. What ifs, what ifing situations. The other thing I would say is always know where you are and always know where you are in relation to an exit. Okay. So if you're sitting in a restaurant with your family, we all know where the front of the restaurant is. If somebody comes in there and has an issue with the bartender and decides they want to start shooting up the place, where's another exit for you and your family? You should always be able to see who's coming in. If you're the protector of the family or you're somewhere by yourself, always be able to see what's coming in and always have another way out. That's a
Okay.
practical thing. That's a total cop way of thinking.
Okay. And that is interesting. Like I have, a family and in those types of fields, and that's exactly like they never want their back to the door. They're always like, I'm going to sit on this side of the
Yeah.
table. And it just, I
Yeah.
understand where it comes from, but it's not a general way of thinking for most individuals. So I truly appreciate you bringing that up because that helps you to be just more aware. If you are like, if I'm a mom out with my three kids, like I need to be the one to see where and how to get out of here to keep them as safe as absolutely possible. So thank you for sharing that. Um, are there any other way? I mean, obviously, besides attending like a seminar with you, are there any other ways that people can build confidence just in their ability to handle the unexpected or threatening situations. I mean, obviously nobody really knows how they'll react or respond until you're in that particular situation. But like you'd mentioned, like being aware of what your body will go through, is there ways for them to figure that out or understand what might happen or just be more prepared in general?
The best way to prepare in general, my advice is to just learn how to start what ifing situations. And it only takes a few seconds, but it's just mental preparation. Okay. So uh, when we're talking about being aware of our surroundings, we're talking about having a survival mindset, and we're talking about what ifing situations. So you're walking into the mall with your kids. It takes 2 seconds to, as you're walking through the food court, to think, what if something happened right now? Where would I go? Where would I run? Where would I take my kids? What if I heard a shot fired? It's just like, probably maybe if you have a teenage driver, okay, you tell them what to do if they're pulled over, what to do if you're in an accident. It takes a few seconds to do a little bit of rehearsal in your head of what if this happens, what if that happens. And I think some people, they might think it's kind of like morbid thinking. It's not morbid thinking, it's reality, So we all just need to start what ifing situations a little bit. Just, okay, what if this happened? What would I do? And that little bit of mental preparation can help you to be a little bit better prepared if the worst case scenario were to happen. We did it a lot on the police department. I did it a lot working undercover, and a lot with the assignments that we did in special operations. You're just kind of in your mind thinking about, okay, if this happens, I can do this. If that happens, I could do that. It's giving you options, and it's buying you a couple seconds in scenarios where a couple seconds count, right? So if we already know when I'm walking through the mall where my closest exit is, God forbid we hear shots fired, those few seconds can mean living or not living, right? They can mean getting hit with a bullet or not. A few seconds make a really big difference when we're talking about these types of scenarios.
Yeah, absolutely. What about like in reference to children? Like I say that a lot because I travel very frequently with my kids. So what is a way to approach it with kids to where it's like, hey, this is without scaring you of every aspect of life, but how to create like that preparedness and readiness, and just to help them be more aware of their surroundings so that we're not, as 30, 40-year-old individuals trying to change and resurface things that you have been doing for 30, 40 years. Like, how do we instill this in children in an aware situation, not a complete terrifying situation for them?
Yeah, I think it's just, it's the same general ideas, but in age appropriate conversation. So I think, most parents, I would hope, what if with their children, like, what if you get lost? What if we get separated? And it's giving them practical advice depending on what their age is. So, it's one thing that's really huge is, maybe not necessarily teaching stranger danger. So instead of, don't talk to strangers, okay, what if you get lost in the mall? What do? You find a helper, right? So we're going to look for somebody that looks like a mom or somebody that's wearing a uniform. So it's teaching kids, okay, so just, you don't have to have the scary conversation about, oh, now what if, this person next to us gets shot or we hear gunshots, but hey, who's a helper around here? Who do you think looks like a helper? Where is, do you know your phone number? Do they know their last name? Just little things like that could help, in a situation if they were to get separated, or God forbid something happened to the parent, that would help the authorities figure out who this child is. Things like that's just like one example, so you don't necessarily have to have, active shooter conversation with your 7-year-old, but the 7-year-old needs to be able to identify who a helper is in a really bad situation, right?
Yeah. That's a really good, I don't know we play the what if game. As scary or terrifying as it might seem to them, we do play that what if game, but I don't think I've ever just asked them, like, who around here, like, as we're sitting in this restaurant, who looks like a helper to you? Who would you go to if you needed help? If we were sitting in this restaurant right now, or if we were walking through the mall, who around you? Because it does help them to start being aware of their surroundings also, and who could be somebody that they could, like, this looks like a safe person. This looks like just helping them to understand those ideas and start to rationalize who's safe besides mom and dad, right? Like, or a teacher for those younger kiddos. So I think that is very valuable information. As we kind of like wrap things up, like what motivates
and just
you?
As a
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say the other thing is that, and this is, I could give you like a really long story to annotate this, but I won't. But I will say, kids do pay attention, and it's important for when a child does speak up to an adult about something that's making them uncomfortable in a store or something that they're noticing. Don't always just discount it as like their imagination, because I could tell you some really crazy stories from back in the days of the police department where kids were aware of their surroundings. It did say something and it was ignored, and it turned out to be something more than what it was. So, don't discount a child and if they're noticing something, just investigate it just a little bit, because it could be worth it in the long run.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think what happens as we age is our intuition gets like what's the word I'm coming up with? Like where you just ignore that intuition.
Yeah.
And I think kids have this natural ability.
Yeah.
And I think that is true, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So
100%.
What motivates you personally to kind of continue this teaching journey and educating others? Like what is it for you?
It's the potential to save lives. I mean, quite honestly, that's really what it is. I have information, I have experiences. Every time I do one of these seminars, I've had people that come up to me and say, gosh, I'm so glad that you are teaching this, because this happened to me. And that is so true. When I was in this situation, that's exactly what happened to me. I had tunnel vision. I hadn't clearly thought out how I was going to react, or I reacted this way and I wish I hadn't. It's valuable information. I mean, I was a helper for 20 years on the police department. When you leave that job, there's still a part of you that wants to be able to help in some way. And so even though I may not be the one, running into the active shooter situation in a uniform anymore, I can do my part, which is just sharing my experiences, sharing what I've learned throughout the years of training and practicing and all the things that I've done. It's sharing my information, because maybe it will make a difference. And I've been told many times by people that have attended the seminars that, wow, what you told me, I used that, or my child used it, or my college student used it, they had a good outcome, because you had told me, how to what if the situation, or I was aware of my surroundings and I was able to get out of there quicker than what I would have before.
Yeah. That's really, I guess, maybe not an area that I don't have college age kids, so that's maybe something I haven't really contemplated, but I love, like, these are kids that are going off to college. They're living on their own, likely for the first time ever. And there has been a protective mechanism, like kind of overseeing that for their whole life. And they maybe don't know any kind of different. And, we can educate, we can teach all the time, but being in that real circumstance could produce different outcomes. So I think that is such a really cool idea, especially as we have graduating classes starting to happen and kids starting to figure out where they're going to college. Like, what a cool idea for you to go to schools, you to go to like all of these amazing things, just to share these tidbits, just to continue to keep us safe. We see it all the time where I always talk to my kids, like, you just don't ever leave a friend. If you're with a group, you all need to stay as a group. Nobody goes off on their own. You all stay together as a group. And how many times have we seen that where, individuals have gone missing or things like that, and they were ready to go home, so they just left by themselves. And that is just one thing that, like, I think there's so many other of those types of scenarios that maybe they've never been placed in or they aren't aware of, to know that that's what's happening. So I really love that idea. I think that is, I think you are going to make a huge impact on saving lives and just keeping people safe, just for simply awareness and bringing things to the forefront that we've just never contemplated. Because in general, most individuals are not bad guys. We don't think like bad guys.
Right.
And so we don't know what we don't know.
Exactly.
So,
yep.
I love it. So if people wanted to learn more about how to bring you into their place of business, to their school, to their community, to their group, to their church, how do they find out more about you and how to reach that?
They can head to my website, vigilantminds-info.com. So that explains a little bit more about my different seminars. There's a direct email where you can contact me, inquire about more information. So yeah, vigilantminds-info.com.
I love it. We'll also put that website on this Facebook Live down in the comments. So if anybody's going back and rewatching this, you can always find that there. Andria, thank you so, so much for sharing your insight and your knowledge with our community and the world and on our Facebook Live today. I really appreciate you taking the time and for all the effort and using all of your hard work in law enforcement and bringing it to additional good use even after you have moved on past that. So thank you again. I hope everybody who's watching has a fabulous rest of your day, and we'll see you guys for the next Facebook Live soon. Thanks, everyone.